Good morning. I thought I'd do a little video to talk about Uidlua a little bit more, the spirit that I work with for divination and who is featured in the sigil painting that I did recently. So here's the finished painting. I just took it off of the board where it was being pressed to kind of properly flatten it, because the vellum has a tendency to kind of warp a little bit from the warmth and moisture of being worked on. So now that it's properly flattened, I can get it scanned and prints made soon. You can see in the light that it has kind of that metallic illumination. And some of you asked, had curiosity about the letters and signs that are worked into her clothing. So you can see along the edge of the red cloak, that's basically the Ogham alphabet that's just kind of repeated throughout the painting along the edge of her red cloak in gold. And then the lettering along the edge of the blue dress is the Lepontic Gaulish alphabet. It's also sometimes you might see it referred to as Lugano, and I believe that's the name of the place where inscriptions with this type of lettering were first identified, perhaps. Yeah, it's typically called Lepontic. It's a Etruscan influenced alphabet that is the one that is used for the earliest inscriptions in the Gaulish language. So it's one of our early forms of Celtic writing. And it's in here because I work with a letter-based divination system using these Lepontic letters, similar to the way folks might be familiar with the Norse or Germanic runes as a divination system. And I will send out a document later, or post it for patrons, so that you can kind of see that system in case you're interested in it. So the background on Uidlua is that she kind of showed up as a spirit when I was working on developing this Gaulish divination system. It's something that I worked together with a fellow named Owen Cook on, and he is the author of the Deo Mercurio blog, if you might be familiar with that. He writes about like Gallo-Roman polytheism and religion and stuff, and so he and I both kind of independently had this idea, from looking at the Lepontic letters, that many of them look very similar to the runes, which you might have noticed from looking at these. If you're familiar with runes, some of these may look like runes to you. And that's not an accident. It's thought that the Etruscan alphabet strongly influenced both systems historically. So anyway, Owen and I both noticed that there was this resemblance, and it seemed like maybe you could figure out a way to use the Lepontic letters as a runic type of system for divination and magic and the like. And so he and I both kind of started working on it independently, and then we discovered we were both working on it and started working on it together. And in the process of my own work with the system, I was doing a very spirit-led approach. I was working with the letters and kind of creating idea clusters of Gaulish words and concepts that were connected to those letters, and then I was, doing divination consulting basically spirits that are connected with Celtic religion and tradition, ancestors of tradition that I work with, consulting them to ask them for input on, you know, sort of refining those conceptual maps for each of the letters. And in the process, this one spirit stepped forward and identified herself to me and basically said, you're creating this thing that essentially is connected to the role that I occupied in this kind of cultural paradigm. And so I will be your spirit to work with for this. And you know, she sort of essentially took charge of this runic, this Celtic system. And she identified herself to me as Uidlua. That is a name that I, or title, that I had come across in some of the like Gaulish magical texts. There's a couple of them that refer to either a person or a title or like the name of a role, Uidlua, which basically would be translated as like seer, seeress. It's got a feminine ending, and it comes from roots that refer to seership or wisdom through sight, the root wid. And there is actually a cognate in the Irish tradition. The seeress and poet Fedilm, or Fedilov, depending on like if you're pronouncing Old Irish. She shows up in the Táin Bó Cúailnge. She's a seeress and poetess that Queen Maeve consults for oracular prophecy about what the fate of her endeavor will be. And so she's described in the Táin as being this, you know, beautiful, bright-haired woman who's dressed in very fine clothes, and she's, I think, standing in a chariot giving oracular prophecy. And so Uidlua, as a spirit, the way she identified herself to me is that she is not an individual, you know, formerly alive person. She is a collective spirit that kind of speaks as the voice of all those who in the past occupied this role of seer and prophetess. And she, you know, in that sense is sort of like a collective of spirits that occupy an archetype or an archetypal image, and speak as one. And she did sort of confirm to me that she can be closely identified with the Irish Fedilm, and you know, since that is the source where we actually have mythology about her, that is an appropriate kind of way for approaching her also, since in the Gaulish context we only have her name. So yeah, she is a spirit that I work with whenever I'm using this Celtic divination system. I make offerings to her and ask her for aid, and it's kind of through her that I am able to find that system most useful. And so because she has been of great help to me in my practice around Celtic magic in general, you know, the divination system that she helped me to develop has been extremely helpful to me in developing these practices. I thought, you know, I wanted to kind of give her the honor of doing the first piece of sigil artwork for her in this kind of little series that I'm working on. So that's the sort of background to this painting. I thought maybe I should talk about the sigil there. So, you know, you can see it's like floating in the bowl that she's holding, and that would be something that I would be thinking of as sort of like a bowl you might use for gazing for divination. It's also kind of floating behind her head in gold. And what went into that sigil, I thought it might be interesting to talk about that, since I've been working on the sigil chapter. So there's sort of a variety of pieces that went into that sigil. First and foremost, the Gaulish letter that we call Vulatos is in there, and it's repeated twice. That is the letter that begins her name, and it also has meanings in this divination system that are connected to both sovereignty and seership, and the role of prophecy in guiding leadership, and kind of a bunch of different things like that. So it is kind of her letter, if you will. So that needed to be in there. And then you will also see those little hash marks. Those are the Ogham letter Col, which represents hazel and is connected to the seeking of wisdom. And then, you know, there's also some kind of like symbolic shapes in there. So I wanted to make the overall sigil take the shape of an eye, because it is connected to her power of seership. So it does have that kind of overall shape. In the center, like inside what would be the pupil, there's a triple spiral, and that's specifically a reference to the description of Fedalm. In the Irish literature, it talks about her having 3 pupils in each eye, just kind of as a way of saying that her eyes are very special, and maybe that they see through all the worlds. So it's kind of a marker of her power of visionary sight. So that felt important to put in there. And then I just kind of wrapped it all up together in a way that felt right to me. So, you know, just like an illustration of kind of how that process can look for sigil construction. So that's Uidlua, and I will get this video up, and feel free to come and ping me either in the comments or over on the Discord channel if you want to chat and, you know, continue the discussion about her. And pretty soon I will put up a PDF document that has like how to use this letter divination system in case you're interested in that.